"I'll tell Cook," she said a trifle distractedly, halfway back to the door. There were 100 jobs waiting to be done, and Cicely's room had still to be made up. Her aunt enjoyed the freedom of wealthy widowhood, travelling when and where she chose from her home in the shadow of the Minster. But why she had decided to visit London at such short notice, Alice had no idea. It was another burden on a household already besieged. "And Alice," her mother called after her, "fetch Lydia's letters from your room. Cissy will want to read news of her niece." She felt her chest tighten. She had letters, certainly, a tidy sheaf of them, but if she were to show them to her aunt, Cicely was quick-witted enough to notice that the last message from Lydia was dated months ago. So far, Alice had managed to keep this knowledge from her parents by dint of reading the letters aloud, selecting passages from here and there, and pretending the news had arrived only that morning. Before the letters stopped entirely, they had become less frequent and less informative, but she had still kept up the pretense. She couldn't allow them to know that Lydia had seemingly vanished without a clue to her whereabouts, not in their weakened state. She gave swift instructions to Cook to fetch down the bone china from a top shelf and made a strict count of the number of madeleines to appear on the tea trolley before she climbed the stairs to the guest bedroom. Dora was already there and giving the satin counterpane a final smooth when Alice put her head around the door. "What else needs doing?" she asked the maid. "Just the flowers, miss. Dibbins delivered the narcissi an hour ago and they're soaking in the kitchen, but they need a bit of arranging. I'll run down and get them." "Bless you. My legs have turned to jelly." "And no wonder. You've been up and down these stairs all morning, fetching and carrying." Dora sniffed loudly, but she allowed the moment to pass. Alice knew the maid's opinion of her mother's illness. Domestic servants did not have the luxury of nerves. But Dora was wrong. Her mother had always been fragile. It was her husband who had given Edith stability, and when he'd fallen ill so shortly after Charlie's death, the spirit had gone from her completely. She arranged the narcissi as best she could in a favourite Murano vase and was making her way downstairs again when the thud of the door-knocker echoed through the empty hall. Aunt Cissy. King's Cross could not have been that busy. Her aunt's arrival would at least bring cheer to the house. When the telegram had first arrived, Alice had thought of confiding her worries, but realised almost immediately that Cissy was likely to go straight to her sister with Lydia's tale. The two women were closer than twins, and if her father learned that his younger daughter was missing, possibly in danger, it could prove fatal. His heart attack had left him vulnerable to a final blow, which would be enough to seal her mother's fate too. No, she couldn't tell. She must keep up the pretense that Lydia was alive and well and enjoying teaching in a foreign land. And believe that her sister would write soon, from wherever she was. Alice had written to Topkapi. The Sultan seemed to own a bewildering array of palaces, but Topkapi was the address Lydia had written on each of her letters. The official who responded had been adamant that her sister was no longer with them. There remained at the palace only a few of Lydia's personal possessions that he would be happy to send. 2 pens, several photographs, a few watercolours, and a book. His letter had been brief, and its curt disapproval had shone through the uneven English. Sultan Selim was most displeased. His daughter's governess had left without warning, and no one had an idea where she was. Alice could not quite believe that. If it were true, it would be completely out of character. Lydia might be impulsive, thoughtless even, but Alice was certain she would never simply disappear without telling her family. "Darling, how are you?" Cicely's substantial figure filled the hall. The cabbie bundled in behind her, puffing heavily from dragging several large pieces of luggage up the front steps. Alice wondered just how long her aunt was intending to stay. The older woman held her at arm's length and gave her a prolonged stare. "Not too well, by the look of it," she said, answering her own question.